Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show, coming at you live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. This is Scotland's #1 nationalist chat from anti-nationalist chat, not nationalist chat, anti-nationalist chat. You've got the wrong place. If you're a nationalist, or maybe you've got the right place if you want to be converted. Anyways, I'm here tonight with co-host Mary Devlin and David Griffiths. How are you both this evening?
Well, I'm very well, thank you.
Yep, all good here also, thanks.
Right, so what are you going to be talking about today, David?
Tonight I will be looking back at last night's Scottish Holyrood Party Leaders Debate.
Okay, Mary, what have you got for us?
Well, tonight I'm going to be talking about Nicola Sturgeon's mug on TV on election night.
As if we haven't seen enough of that kind of horror show. Anyway, and also I'll be talking about Douglas Ross, his resignation as leader of the Scottish Conservative Party.
Indeed. Hang on a sec. Is this
Mary?
me? Hang on.
And of course, we have Zimmer of the Week.
Yes, okay, so we'll be back with all that and much more in just a few moments. So see you soon. You can find the titles. Right, welcome back to the Majority Show, Scotland's #1 politics and chat from an anti-nationalist perspective. Hi, Paul, and hi to all our regular people who are coming in there. So from sunny Livingston, usually we get from Saudi Arabia as well, and Stirling, all kinds of places. So thank you very much
all over the world
for joining us tonight. It's going to be, as usual, a fun-packed show. Let me see. What have we got? I'm Mark Devlin, the host, and I'm here today with Mary and David, who you should know already. We also have a huge thanks to everyone who's coming in from UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages, where many of you are watching from this evening. Yes, very good.
Indeed. And remember, sharing is caring. The #1 thing you can do is to like the show on YouTube. Even if you don't subscribe, give a like. That would be most useful. And if you can subscribe, please do so, as it increases the reach of the show at the click of one button.
Very good.
And of course, I'll be handling the relentless flood of comments tonight. So please keep them short and snappy, and I'll try to put as many on screen as I can.
Right, very good. Last week we started a crowdfunding campaign for billboards, SNP out. There it is there. And we have already raised 1,600. Is that how much is on there?
Yes.
£1,609.42. Thanks to you all, good people, very generous donations so far. But we still have a long way to reach our target, which is £4,000. So we're a bit less than halfway there. So if you can donate, please do so. We need to send a message. You know, we saw there was a crappy John Swinney billboard we saw released this week. Something that was like kind of Anglophobic, you know. We want Scottish leadership, not Westminster leadership. And I think we can do much better. SNP out. It's a straightforward message. Everyone understands what it is. And in giant 20-foot high letters, it will be just the thing to make you happy and to annoy your enemies. And what more could you want than that for a £5? If you just drop that in right now. Anyway.
Or as much as you can afford.
Oh, as much as you can afford. £1 even. £1 is fine, although it take a while to get there. But anyway, if that's all you've got, that is most appreciated. Of course, every donation is appreciated. Everything gets us that bit closer towards our target. So, if you're on YouTube, you can donate using a super thanks or super sticker, and we did get some of those last week. Thank you very much for those who donated. Of course, thank you to everyone who's donated so far. Right, what have we got? So, let's talk about the news. Starting today with the news that Douglas Ross has resigned as leader of the so-called Scottish Conservative Party. Ross, not the cleverest of politicians, had gotten himself enmeshed in multiple controversies. First being that he allegedly used parliamentary expense claims to cover his linesman's duties. Sunday Mail reported concerns that had been raised over 28 expenses, travel claims, For example, a £58 parking fee at Inverness Airport in July 2018 while Parliament was in recess, and claiming another about £50 for parking the day he refereed a Celtic game. So, David, do you know much about these?
I know nothing about these claims at all. I mean, it looks like somebody has got a Freedom of Information request to find out when he's submitted expense claims, and has put 2 and 2 together and said, hang on a minute, that might be for a day when he wasn't actually doing any parliamentary work. And nothing more than that, unfortunately. But who knows? I mean, innocent until proven guilty and all that, but it's not going to look great if he has done something he shouldn't have, particularly after the way he was with Michael Matheson. But I guess...
So, I mean, what's your opinion on MPs or MSPs having second jobs?
Yeah, to me, it's different if you're a lawyer or something and you go into politics. That makes perfect sense. But to be a politician who goes into something else, like Ross being an SPL referee, that just looks terrible. Just looks like he craves attention, really. You know, if he's not unpopular enough being a Conservative Party leader, he wants to be a referee as well. He must be a master.
He's a glutton for punishment.
It's right. But if you think it's okay to sit as an MSP and then think, oh, I know what, I'll become an MP also. How awful does that look? It just sets such a dreadful example, and it makes them look... gluttonous is the word, in fact, grasping and gluttonous. That's what it's like. And with the stuff Ross doing last week, we'll talk about it later, I know, but doesn't that just say to you, here's a party with a dearth of talent, so much so that it seems there's only one qualified person to stand in the event that somebody's unable to fulfill their duties and accept a nomination, or if a nomination is taken away. Just looks dreadful. But surely these parties have got the ability to attract new candidates or to develop talent from within, rather than being relying on 1 or 2 people anytime anything bad happens.
It does seem there does seem to be a real dearth of talent in the whole thing. It is quite something. I mean, I don't mind them having other jobs. That's fine. I mean, if you can do that, but don't fiddle your expenses while you're doing it.
Well, hold on a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not quite as clear cut and obvious as the Matheson case as to these expenses.
No,
right.
I mean, we don't actually know, because people have raised concerns doesn't mean he's guilty. And I'm no fan of Douglas Ross, but in the Matheson case, it was blatant lies and fiddling. In this case, I really don't know. I'd like someone to investigate it.
Well, I mean, he says that he has an excuse for each of these expense claims. He says that, for example, the one where he went down the recess, he took a boys' brigade tour down there or something like that, or on tour in Parliament, and that may all be true. That's fine.
Well, he could still possibly be doing parliamentary business even when they're in recess, no?
Yes. Well, anyway, the SNP, of course, have made a huge hoo-ha about this as well. I mean, there's a problem, as you pointed out there, Mary, that it just means there's a false moral equivalence, or even a moral equivalence, actually, because if he has actually done it, then it's the SNP just say at any point, well, your bad guy's just as bad as our guy, even though Matheson, tried to scam the taxpayer of £11,000. It's still the same thing. It's still, you've got a scamming politician in their eyes, and I think it's reasonable to say that's true to some extent. But
we don't know. And Catherine is saying, thank you for think you are being too hard on Ross. He stopped the SNP getting a majority in 2021 and binned useless.
Oh, well, anyone could have been useless. Anyone could have been useless at that point, but useless was hanging on by a thread. And as about the majority, I think David might talk about that part.
Exactly. I mean, this is often said about Douglas Ross. He stopped the SNP getting majority. He got the Conservative Party the same number of seats that they got the previous time. So I wouldn't say he stopped it. It's just that what happened was 4 additional Green MSPs got elected, which gave the nationalist side, the pro-independence side, a bigger majority than they would have had otherwise. To be honest with you, I think the fact that the SNP fell 1 short of a majority meant very little difference in the first 3 years of this parliamentary term, because all that happened was you had the Greens being even worse than the SNP. So the fact that they were in coalition with a party rather than being the majority, I don't think that really helped very much, to be honest. Fair enough, it's all falling apart now, but this idea that Douglas was single-handedly stopped the majority, I think that's a very, very generous summation of his career, to be honest with you. And I think you could argue it's technically true. I'm not sure he stopped it as such, but anyway.
Well, we'll go through a big long list of all of Douglas Ross's issues a little bit later.
Can I just talk about Alan Jack's comment here?
Yes, what's that?
He says if Ross has immediately resigned his leadership of the Scottish Conservatives because of this, it's the exact opposite of Matheson, who clung on as a minister to the very end.
Sure,
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Of course, he's claiming he hasn't stood down because of it. So but the point's true. Yeah, if that were the case, it would be the opposite of Matheson, indeed. Yeah, and at a lot lower scale as well.
So, yes. What have you got? Your thoughts on this issue, David, if not covered above?
Well, I mean, the fact that you can't accuse him of anything or find him guilty before anything's due process has happened. But really, you've got to be very, very careful when you're making expense claims when you're a politician. We've seen MPs go to jail before. I'm not for a minute suggesting Ross is guilty or otherwise. I've no idea, and genuinely no idea. But of course, if you're going to make a fuss about other people, you've got to be squeaky clean yourself. So I hope for his sake he is. I hope there's nothing to this, because it does seem like a little bit of a pile on. And I know what it's like to get a newspaper like The Record getting a bit between their teeth and pursuing a story, even if they suspect it's not true. So yeah, I do have some sympathy here. I hope it's not the case. It would be a remarkably foolish epitaph if it proves that he had been less than 100% clean with his expenses.
Yes, I mean, as he said, innocent until proven guilty, nonetheless. But one thing he does appear to be somewhat guilty of is of taking the place of another candidate. Now, this he took the seat from Aberdeen North and Moray East seat off of David Duguid. Is that how you say it, David Duguid?
David Duguid, I think they call him.
Oh, is it Duguid?
Oh.
Right, okay. After the party say that Duguid was not well enough to stand in more ways than one, I guess, and deselected him. Ross previously stated that he would be standing down as an MP at the election to focus on his duties at Holyrood, such as they are. And Duguid had held the seat, says here, since 2017. He'd already been adopted by the party members and has disputed suggestions that he is seriously ill. He says, I was a bit surprised to see so many of them describe me as seriously ill. That was true when I was in intensive care a month ago, but certainly not now. I continue to be fully focused on my rehabilitation and making great progress daily, because he has not actually detailed what his condition is, but it's to do with spinal, something to do with the spine, and he had pneumonia as well. He spent a number of weeks in various hospitals before being transferred to the high dependency unit at the QE Hospital, University Hospital in Glasgow. But only 2 weeks ago, he returned to the Commons to much applause. Did you see that? I think we all saw that. Party chairman Craig Hoy told BBC Scotland News that Mr. Ross, who sits on the 8-member board that does the selection, did not take part in the 2 meetings regarding Mr. Duguid. David, is this an example of the Tories treating disabled people poorly?
Well, frankly, I think it's an example of the way disabled or seriously ill people tend to be treated if it becomes clear that they're going to be away from the workplace for some time. I think that is a very good point. But to be honest, I think this is another example of advisors coming up with foolish ideas or membership selection committees. Whoever said to Douglas Ross, I tell you what would look really good. Why don't you take the nomination instead of a seriously ill guy who we will deselect forcibly without any option? My God, I mean, that is Premier League idiocy, genuinely. But what I did read, I mean, I'm not so sure about this, Mr. Duguid not being so well, or being not as unwell as previously, because I read the other day that it's only recently that he stopped being fed through a nasal straw for feeding. My God. I mean, you've got to be seriously ill if that's happening. I mean, it sounds terrible. I'm not at all trying to be prurient about the poor man's illness. I don't know what that is either. But he's clearly very seriously unwell. And maybe this is a case that the party board thought, we're only being kind here by doing this because we don't want to put any pressure on the poor man.
Let's just put him down.
Yeah, I mean,
put him out of his misery.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the question of treatment of disabled, I have to say, as an ex-employer and more recently as an employee, when I was actually seriously ill at one point, and I'm still technically disabled as a result, I've seen firsthand exactly what it's like when you make it clear that you're not going to be able to attend the workplace for a long time. all of a sudden the employer's attitude changes markedly. I can assure you, it really does. And it's not like an abrupt overnight thing, but just after a few weeks, you find, hang on a minute, that's not something they would ever have said to me a few weeks ago. And that's what it's like. It's like there's an impatience on the part of employers to bring maybe a little bit of an unfortunate episode to an end. So there's almost like a leaning on the employee to say, well, of course, you don't really want to stay, do you? You can't really keep doing this, can you? And that's what it's like. And it's possibly understandable from the point of view of the employers. But yeah, I would say disabled, unwell employees have absolute right to recover within the context of their employment, and this gentleman is certainly
yes.
an example
It
of
does
that.
seem to go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say, it sounds to me as if they hadn't really talked to him, consulted with him properly.
Yeah.
He seemed to be suggesting that no one had really talked with him.
Yeah.
You think that would be the first thing you do is you sit down and try and persuade the person if you don't think that they're going to be well enough to do the job. You try and talk to them and explain and back and forth and consult.
Yeah, but for
just butcher them.
Yeah, exactly. For the two parties to have such different takes on it, one saying he's clearly not well enough, the other guy saying, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm getting much better. Wow. I mean, just the whole way of that coming out, and of course the guy who took the role on it couldn't really have been handled much worse. It's dreadful.
Yeah, well, I kind of think if you can still speak, I mean, surely you can represent folk, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if that's the kind of level it's at. I mean, there are
you have to turn up at your constituency office.
There are examples,
unless you're Nicola Sturgeon.
Severely disabled parliamentarians all over the world, including we have one here, Pam, whatever her name is, Duncan Clancy, right? Classy, right? She is severely disabled. She gets on with her duties. In America, we have some might say Biden is, not in the state that should the parliamentarian should be in.
Indeed.
Alan Jack is saying, I think time constraints for registering as a candidate and his medical condition played a big part in rushing this decision.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. I think from what they said, they only had one day to nominate somebody. Okay, they nominated Ross. Okay, was there really nobody else who could have done it, really? But maybe they were thinking, look, this is really important that we have a credible candidate in this seat because it's
maybe they were thinking that.
The credible part.
Maybe they were just looking for somewhere for Douglas Ross to go.
You know what? I don't think it's that, but it could be. But I mean, really, if they've reached that stage, that's dreadful. It just looks like one of those very unfortunate incidents which didn't really suit either party, and the outcome is very much suboptimal for everybody. And my goodness,
no, I don't really go for that. I think they were looking for a place to put him. I think, and they were better going with the devil they knew than the disabled devil who was there already, kind of thing.
Maybe so. I don't know. We're playing with conjecture.
Well, what would happen to Douglas Ross if he wasn't going for this seat?
Well, he was just nothing at the moment because he wasn't going. He was just prior to this. He was just focusing, as he said he was going to, on the Holyrood and his role as leader of the party. He wasn't going to have anything to do with this election until this came up last week and said, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." Yeah, okay, great. So what would have happened is he'd have carried on doing his job like Aaron Starwer. So.
Well, I think that the problem is that, as we say, is the optics of it all are really a disaster. I mean, it just looks like he's stealing a disabled guy's seat and kicking him out. Irrespective of all this, all type of things that we're doing here and what the circumstances and all that. This seems to be an issue with Ross in general. Seem to have very poor political understanding. But let's finish with this guy, Doug Weed, as someone pointed out, the Doug Weed. They said that as if it wasn't bad enough, it means he won't be eligible for a £15,000 redundancy payment from Parliament. Because apparently MPs who lose their seat or unsuccessfully stand for another seat are given twice the statutory redundancy entitlement as a loss of office payment. And those who do not contest a seat do not get the payment, which means that Mr. Duggeed will not get the payment. But Ross will get the payment now. If he loses, because he would have contested the seat and lost.
Goodness sake!
Then he should declare that he's going to give that money to.
Yeah, he should. Yeah, you're right.
Right. Okay, we're back for a general discussion about Douglas Ross and his legacy. Let's put it that way, such as it is, in a second. Right, awful timing, certainly. Resigning as the head of the Scottish Conservatives with weeks, or just a few weeks into the campaign for a general election. Very poor timing. But some people here may have said that Ross did something, or others. I've always found him to be an uninspiring and underwhelming candidate. And a bit of an idiot, really, to be honest. Actually, very poorly, to have very poor decisions in general. So, kind of starting from, we're going to try and do this a bit free because we'll just see what we come up with between me, David, and Mary, and actually, of course, you as well. So, get into saying this, please do put in a comment to Mary. But if you remember back to when he was selected as the Tory leader, Michelle Ballantyne had to leave the party, and she ended up going to Reform, which actually had not much chance then. But now she would actually, she could actually been with a shot because with a resurgent Reform actually, because she knew that Douglas Ross was going to be weak in Brexit. That was a big issue of the time, and he wanted to have someone in. That would have been good if we had a Scottish party leader who wanted to actually talk to the 1 million Scottish people who voted to leave the EU, of which Ruth Davidson refused to do, never did. And it turned out Douglas Ross never did as well. He just completely refused, never talked to those people at all.
No.
In fact, what he did was the opposite. He ended up attacking Boris Johnson at every opportunity on Brexit. And even when Boris Johnson had any misdemeanour came up from Boris Johnson, notably Partygate, Ross was at the front of the line with handing out the knives to stick them into Boris Johnson's front or back, doesn't really matter to him, which prompted Jacob Rees-Mogg to say, I don't think Douglas Ross is a big figure. He's been constantly in opposition to the Prime Minister against Brexit. He's not someone you would expect to say helpful things about the Prime Minister. And then he called him a lightweight. Was he a lightweight, David?
Well, my view, at the start I thought he'll be a capable enough leader, but no, he wouldn't fill Ruth Davidson's shoes sufficiently well. But to me, he never seemed to be fully on top of it, really. His constant mantra, if you remember that 3 years ago, all they ever talked about was say, vote Conservative to stop SNP talking about independence. That's all they ever said.
Drive me daft.
Every time he would say this, which of course handed them ammunition, because if the SNP did win, as they did, albeit not with a majority, but still with 62 out of 73 seats, which is pretty damn convincing, particularly when they came second in the other 11. So that's really quite an endorsement of what they're standing for, you would think. But no, as far as Ross is concerned, I stopped them. Oh, yeah, okay, mate.
I tried to make every election into a referendum.
So you're
like, exactly well, what's the point of that? I said this at the time. He should just have said, look, independence is off the table.
Yes.
The people of Scotland don't want it. There's no legal route to it. There's no political route to it. So what we want to do is we want to talk about what the problems that people have here: failing schools, health, and society, whatever it is, something like that. Just get off the topic and onto something else. But they wanted to make and he was even doing it there.
Exactly. Last week, when he was interviewed, why are you standing there? He said, I want to win this seat to end the SNP's obsession with independence. What that's going to do is, if you win Aberdeenshire North, that will mean the SNP will say, oh, look what's happened, he's wild God. Okay, let's pack it up then, guys, forget that. No, it won't. People have been voting Conservative, have been voting for Ross for several years, but the SNP still as obsessed as ever, so that hasn't worked, has it? But he's still pushing that same tired old line. It's ridiculous. His problem is, really, that he treats voters like they're idiots. And he's using the lines that the SNP is using, but reversed. So they will say, only the SNP can stop the Tories in seats all over Scotland. And he says, only the Tories can stop the SNP in seats all over Scotland. Yes, 6 of them.
I know, it's absolute nonsense. I mean, I don't know how they can just sit there in their wee strategy room and say, yeah, we're going to do this. This is the great strategy. We're going to say that we're going to win in all the seats in Scotland.
Well, you're assuming that there even is a strategy room. Maybe there isn't. Maybe that's the problem.
His lines became old.
I don't know.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just saying, his lines just got old and stale, and I think everyone's just sick of listening to it, to be honest. So I think it's only right that he stands down as party leader. I think that was the correct thing to do, or will be the correct thing to do. But this idea that he's now saying, well, of course, if I don't win in Westminster, I'll just stay on here. That really is taking the biscuits. It's like they're making conditional the terms of your taking a job. I mean, really, it just looks awful, the whole thing, and it just makes it look as if he's deciding what's going to happen next with him at the forefront of it. And I just don't like the look of it at all. I don't think voters will either, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, some of our viewers are making comments like we're attacking the wrong people. Can we say why we're talking about Douglas Ross and the Conservatives?
Well, I think I'll just to treat this directly. Look, what we're for in the majority is for strong pro-UK politicians, effective politicians. Douglas Ross was not effective. He was a failure. He ignored the 1 million leavers. He ignored Brexit. Brexit was the number one issue that destroyed Scottish nationalism, well, apart from them losing the referendum, because it means a hard border. But he would never say that. Never say that. Just those words that I just said to anyone, although it makes perfect sense, because he was never for Brexit. He thought that Brexit was a bad idea. And from our perspective, we wanted to say, look, slam the door shut on these people, and he would always appease them. And also with the point of his disloyalty, this was a big issue for me. I felt that any person who is disloyal to the leader, why should you vote for any person who's disloyal to the leader? Because, why should we be loyal to them if they're not loyal to the leader? And he was up there, up the front every time, trying to get headlines and all that for all this stuff against Boris. I mean, why? It was not necessary for him to do that. It didn't help anything in Scotland. It didn't make anyone like him more in Scotland. So what was the point of that? All he was doing was he was causing the problem. Now Boris, of course, had many issues as well, but at least the grassroots Tories liked him. More than can be said about what's his name, Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
So we're not into we criticise the Tory party, we criticise the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, and of course the SNP. But the main thing for us is, can these people be effective? And if they're not, we must push them to be more effective.
Absolutely.
If not, we're not doing our job. And that's the thing. And he was really, I think, very weak, and a appeaser, I think, as well, to some extent. And I think he was a failed promise. And we have this issue here with the Scottish Conservative Party that I'll talk a little bit about later, and where they have promoted people who really are not strong enough to fight the might of the SNP, even though the SNP is a bit of a paper tiger. They're just always fighting from a position of weakness. And I think they've really got a problem with how they see their own followers. They're always looking for something in looking for people that don't exist, I think, or for example, I'll just say this here, that although we'll talk about it later, the Scottish Conservatives always seem to, as a party, seem to be trying to be as moderate as possible, and that just leads to appeasement instead of standing up. And whenever anyone stands up, they say, "Oh, you're far right." They're almost as bad as their opponents in that way, and that's not the way to go forward.
Right. So the question then is, who do we think is going to be the next Conservative leader?
That's a good question.
I think the next Conservative leader will be Liam Kerr. I think he's probably the most capable Conservative MSP, and I think he would be.
Not Stephen Kerr?
No, not Stephen. Stephen Kerr's a nice man, but I don't think he's necessarily the right guy. I mean, he's a strong man, no doubt, but Liam Kerr's he seems very talented to me. The only comment I would make about Ross, I'm not into kicking people when they're down. I'm not into bitching about pro-UK politicians at all. The only thing I would say is, have the actions of Douglas Ross in the last 10 days made it more or less likely that the Conservative Party will stop the SNP in these seats all over Scotland? I would ask yourself that, guys. I don't think it's... Do you think it's enhanced the chances of the Conservatives winning more seats? I don't. So that's why we criticise. That's why I criticise him, because my sole focus, as everybody knows, is stopping the SNP winning any seats if possible. And anything that impairs that, then I'm going to speak out. That's I've got no beef about it.
Yeah, I'll come on to that point and Elizabeth's point, which was just there a little bit later about people voting for the party and not the person. It's almost cynical in a way, perhaps, that the way Douglas Ross has dealt with it. We need someone who can just stand up and say, the line stops here. This is not the way forward. We're doing something different now. And that could have been done 3 or 4 years ago. but it wasn't done. And the problem is not just with Douglas Ross, it's with the whole establishment of Scottish Conservatism, in my humble opinion. Okay, we'll be back in a second just to talk about the latest leaders' debate, such as they were. So hold on a second. Okay, now's the ideal time to get yourself a majority mug or T-shirt, or like this one. Oh, look at that. Abolish Holyrood. That's great. You can get those. All the best people have them. It says here, "Annoy your enemies and delight your friends. Buy them for yourselves and as gifts." And
I think it should just be as a guilty pleasure.
It's the summertime. Everyone needs a new wardrobe. The sun is shining. Time to go out with your Abolish Holyrood T-shirt.
T-shirts on.
No one is going to. It used to maybe in the old days, if you went out with something like that, a bunch of nationalists would surround you with their saltires and beat you to the ground. That's not going to happen anymore. That doesn't go. They're gone. They're going.
Yeah.
So you can wander around with it anyway. Whatever.
You can dare to be seen outdoors.
That's right. Well, that's true.
Not just wandering around the house in your majority T-shirt.
Hey, David, you're up to a little bit. Look at the debate.
Yeah, indeed. So last night, as I'm sure we all know, there was a debate night special on BBC Scotland. And the difference between this one and the previous discussion was this time it was fully interactive with an audience putting questions to the assembled panel. And of course, the assembled panel was made up of 5 of the selected Scottish Holyrood party leaders. So you had joint Green leader Lorna Slater, you had Alex Cole-Hamilton, the Lib Dems, you had Anna Sarwar of Labour, you had John Swinney of the SNP, and of course Douglas Ross. Interestingly, only one of the candidates is standing as a participant in this year's general election. Guess who? But okay, fine. Anyway, so the other 4 really shouldn't. It must have been difficult for the audience to get them engaged in talking about what should have been reserved issues. So most of the chat was really about devolved issues, which was a strange way of having a debate about a general election. But however, that's what happened. Anyway, last week's debate was just questions from Colin Mackay. This was questions from the audience, so it was a bit more, if you like, true to life, I suppose. You got a clip you wanted to play?
Yeah, I've got this one here. Is this the lady? I'm just going to actually play her thing rather than Swinney's thing, because I didn't have listened to it earlier.
On the third row, yes.
Mum of a school child, and I represent many Glasgow parents across education, and this is directed to Mr. Swinney, and I want a direct answer because Glasgow parents and Scottish parents in education are sick of you passing the buck. We're sick of hearing it's Westminster's fault that education is in crisis. We're sick of hearing what Labour would do. We're sick of hearing what the Tories would do. We want to know how you and your party are going to fix what's happening in education right now and make sure every child's need is met.
Okay, that clearly... That is a devolved issue, but you will vote for asking the questions on screen.
Well, it's absolutely vital that every child's needs within the education system are met. We are seeing a rising number of staff working with additional support needs, for example.
But anyway, I'm just going to drop that for now because the answer is not actually important. Important. I think the thing here is I found something quite interesting about this. Basically, the question was its own answer. In a way, it's like you've not been doing enough.
Yeah.
What have you not been? Why have you not been doing stuff? And this now, I looked at this thing on Twitter, and people were like, "Oh, she's a Tory plant. It's a Tory plant." And there was all these people going, "Well, what do you mind if she's a Tory or not? It doesn't. She's just asking a reasonable question." Exactly. But it turns out that she's not a Tory at all. She voted for independence. That's what she said in her tweet. I looked it up, and so this is we've got an SNP supporter in the audience.
Yeah.
Asking what the SNP are going to do. People think they're a Tory for a start, and then just the idea of what are you actually doing? Yeah. And then you've got, of course, I don't know the answers were particularly, but for however many years of not actually doing anything, I suppose there is the thing.
Quite indeed. So I mean, hers was probably the most telling question of the night. There were some decent questions other than that, but there was one very obvious SNP plant who, of course, just focused on Sarwar and saying, Labour's lying and all this nonsense, and he looked so intense with his big eyes staring. So that was pretty obviously somebody who'd been sent there with a question. But just my honestly, but that's what it looked like, right? But my thoughts
Okay.
on to some of the contributions, I would say Swinney really did struggle throughout. His body language, he was all kind of stooped, and occasionally would go like this as if to try and say, "Look, I'm trying to get this over with." You know, really awful looking. He's clearly uncomfortable. He's not a capable debater. He's no one even close to being as capable as Humza. Never mind Sturgeon or
Right.
Salmon. He's that's how poor he is. He's easily the poorest of those four. Conducting a discussion with his peers. He's dreadful. He really, everyone knows what's happening. I'll talk about it in a minute with Swinney. But so I would say was the poorest performer. Slater ranted about. She did land a couple of blows, and she got some applause, mainly when she talked about how resentful she is of wealthy people. That seemed to resonate with the audience. You got a wee clap for that. And I know
Really? Okay.
Stephen Deselection talked her up about how good she was, but all she did was talk about independence and how we need a new Scotland, which is completely renewable. Yeah, right. Okay, thanks. Again, Alex Cole-Hamilton landed a few like he did last week. He asked some good questions, but again, he was very, very Sarwar. He didn't criticise Labour, but then why would he? Labour's not in power, but he did a couple of times. He had a real go at Swinney a lot, and he was jabbing at him, which was quite good to watch. So it looks like Cole-Hamilton still wants to be Sarwar's coalition partner,
Buddy.
possible maybe, but
BFF.
yeah, indeed. But and then you had Ross, of course, who was very heavily criticised, probably even more so than Swinney. He did okay. He handled the criticism okay. He gave good enough replies, but he was on the back foot. Just like you said, the Conservative Party is on the back foot here because you got to feel sorry for them a bit. You know, they're a devolved administration. They're not the party of government in Scotland, and every single day they get abuse for what's going on in Westminster. It's tough, really. It's a tough gig. Anyway.
Oh, well, okay, but I think that's where opinions differ. I think.
Yeah,
I think to some extent, and I'll go into this a bit. That they have to be able to fight.
Sure.
And you can't. You get dealt the chips. You get dealt. Right,
yeah.
So you have to work them. For example, that thing as I said with Brexit, there, right? He could never answer a question in Brexit because he could never defend it because he didn't believe in it himself. But he could easily turn it around. I mean, I think that's just some part of a skill as a politician should have. It's like, I don't necessarily believe this thing, but I'm going to defend it for my party. Yeah. And he wasn't really able to do that.
I mean, that's how they dealt with it. The Scottish Conservatives dealt with Brexit that way from the start. The day that, in fact, before the day Johnson was appointed Prime Minister, Ruth Davidson announced that day she was stepping down. So it was like real huffy.
Yes.
That was their whole attitude. It wasn't like statesman, like it was all right. If that's something, I'm not going to do it then.
Yeah, I'm not playing anymore.
I've got the Sarwar clip here.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at this. We'll play the full thing. It's a minute and a half.
Look, it's for the Scottish people to decide what the future of our country is. This election.
Really? Are you going to allow a referendum?
This election is not about independence. It's about getting rid of this rotten Tory government that's done so much damage over the last 14 years. Yeah. But let me say directly to those people in the room that do support independence or have supported independence in the past. I'm being really upfront and open and honest. I don't support independence. I don't support a referendum. But I can understand why so many people across Scotland were looking for an escape route from a Tory government that they thought we couldn't get rid of, or from a Labour Party that they thought couldn't win. And that's why over the last 3 years, I have worked really hard to give you a Labour Party worthy of the name. And through this election, with hard work, humility and energy, I want to persuade you to vote Labour so we can get rid of this Tory government.
There may well be independent supporters who are about to vote Labour in this general election. What's your direct message to them?
So I would say directly, we may disagree on the final destination for Scotland, but we can all agree we need change right now and we have to get rid of this rotten Tory government. So let's go on this part of the journey together and try and change our country and make the UK work
and then what
for every
happens?
part of the country,
More
including
devolution?
Scotland. So we have said we would reset devolution, we would change the relationship, because right now you have two governments who actually undermine devolution because both look to pick fights with each other and ultimately fail Scotland, whereas I want to go back to a politics where two governments can have different political views, can have different opinions, can believe in different solutions, but are willing to work together in the national interest to deliver for people right here in Scotland.
Well, the last bit's a bit guffy, I think, but the general thing is, I mean, what's he doing there? Is he advocating for? Well, it seems he's advocating for tactical voting from SNP voters rather than give us your vote to get rid of the Tories.
Yeah.
I mean, he's saying that, but he's saying it in a kind of weak way. It's like you could maybe go back later. There's a feeling there. What do you think? What do you think about that, David?
I think exactly that. That just shows you, if you like, guys, the difference in the approach of the two parties, Labour, Scottish Labour and Scottish Conservatives. Douglas Ross is very dogmatic. No, vote for us because we're anti-independence, so vote for us and we'll stop it. Fine. Well, that works up to a point. But then that doesn't give SNP or independence backers anywhere to go with your offering, because they're just going to say, well, I'm not voting for you then. Whereas another party like SAR was saying, well, I understand why you might back independence, and while I don't, I can understand what drove you to it. But all I would say is, if you vote for me, we'll look at the options, all this, which is more mealy-mouthed maybe, but it also gives SNP voters somewhere to go. And then the crucial difference that makes is that it means that Labour is likely to make gains in terms of votes from the SNP, but the Conservatives, frankly, probably won't. So who's got it right?
It's more of a soft sell.
It's a very soft sell.
Exactly.
It's not a hard sell.
From that point of view,
but it will end, Mary, with a tainted love.
Indeed. So, yeah, very good. But, yeah, that I would suggest is why Labour is currently ahead in the polls in Scotland, and why the Conservatives and the SNP are both fighting it out over 6 seats, like we always see, two bald men fighting over a hairbrush.
It's quite interesting. I mean, I thought it was quite interesting, very measured, as you say, very soft. It's like, come to us, but once they're there, they're not going to go back. It seems highly unlikely.
That's what they hope. Of course, that's what we talked about last week. One of the guys said, what happens when 2 years into a Labour administration when we have another election in Holyrood, and all those SNP voters who went to Labour, if they're disaffected, particularly if cuts have been made and spending has been reduced, then what's going to happen then? So it's difficult. But at the moment, Sarwar is just focused on getting votes in this election, whereas the Conservatives seem to be just saying, no, independence has to stop. We're going to stop it. Oh, okay, right.
Yes, well, we'll see. I mean, it's coming closer every day. Is it 3 weeks now or something away?
It's 3 weeks tomorrow. Yes.
Yeah.
3 weeks tomorrow, right? That's the big day when you can put your mark down.
Independence Day.
Well, perhaps for some. Anyway, okay, that was very good. Good. If you've got thoughts on the leaders' debate, please do send them in. What have we got? Can you give more powers? Can you imagine if the SNP got back in power and get more powers? Exactly what we're saying. That's what we're saying. No more powers. In fact, if anything, less powers and no powers. Even better.
Powerless.
Okay. Yes. Well, they want to say that devolution is working because it's their thing. They invented it, as it were, and they want to make sure they think it can be redeemed. That's fine for now if it's Labour and Labour here, but now the SNP are going to be fighting Labour, a Labour UK government. Labour's not going to like that at all. So we'll see how that actually turns out when you think, a devolution, I'm not really sure this is a good idea anymore. Moving on, we'll be back in a second. Mae's going to talk about Nicola Sturgeon getting our mug back on the telly. Not our mug shot, our mug in this case. All right. Okay. All right, Mary, you're up.
Well, when it comes to July 4th, there's a big decision to make. And the big decision is whether you're going to watch ITV and Nicola Sturgeon's face as she's forced to react to devastating losses for her party live on TV. I'm relishing the thought already. And as Labour continue on course to defeat the SNP in Scotland, or whether to avoid her ugly mug altogether and watch the BBC. So I don't know what you'll all be up to on election night, but Nicola Sturgeon is to appear as a star pundit on ITV's election night coverage as a political insider to provide expert analysis alongside Ed Balls and George Osborne.
Right.
And let's not forget,
on how to lose.
David, can you please stop typing?
Very sorry, guys. Sorry.
No
Apologies,
problem.
everyone. That's me being stupid. Forgetting I haven't got my microphone on. Sorry, guys.
Is that you on Tinder? No, I'm not sure. Anyway, back to Nicola Sturgeon, and let's not forget that she has been arrested and remains under police investigation as part of a probe into SNP finances, along with her husband, Peter Murrow, who was charged with embezzlement of party funds in April. So perfect person to have on TV, huh?
Don't mention probe and Nicola Sturgeon in the same sentence.
Well thoughts, Mark. There is actually a petition going around with over 6,000 signatures just in the last couple of days calling for a ban Sturgeon from ITV election night.
Yes, I've actually got that. Hold on.
Put that up.
Right, okay, try and get this up. So I catch? Oh, there it is. There, ban Sturgeon from ITV election night.
So people are divided on whether to watch
6,000
or
at the moment.
not. Yeah, there's over 6,000 people who've done it already. Stephen Daisley, the Mail journalist, says on X, Nicola Sturgeon is going to be on ITV on election night with a camera trained on her, ready to cut to her every reaction every time an SNP MP loses their seat, which should be quite often. And there are unionists who are unhappy about this. Okay, so that's one side of it. In response, Dog Mum on X says, disgusted more than unhappy, purely because the narcissist is being given a platform where she will distance herself from the SNP's destruction as she tries to rebuild her forever damaged reputation. People
true.
like her don't deserve second chances. She destroyed Scotland. So we've got two very opposing views. So guys, Mark, David, will you be watching Nicola on ITV on election night?
Oh, well, for me, I don't know. It's too hard. it's too
Well,
hard.
maybe
I can't.
Maybe we have to keep switching back and forth a little bit.
Well, it's just hard work. It's just hard work. Isn't it?
It's really hard to listen.
It's
maybe
too much.
watching her face.
Especially as we get past all that as well.
Well, my view, guys, I'm tempted because it'd be nice to see the pain on her face when they lose seats, but it would also be nice to see Colin Mackay's face when he realises that all these STV, or should I say SNP TV polls like the two today, one of which said no is on, yes is on 45 and no is on 49, but if you screw your eyes out a wee bit, it's really 46 each. Right, thanks for that. So when he realises that these polls are a lot of rubbish, after all, his face and his demeanour, they will be spectacular because he'll start shouting at his interviews like he always does when he's annoyed. So that will be nice. But the plain fact is, as Mary said, someone who's under active police investigation, someone who's a sitting MSP should not be on an election night panel as a supposedly expert summariser. Who are you kidding? How less relevant could you be? How less qualified could you be to do it under police investigation and
your husband?
Parliament. And your husband's actually been charged. What a joke! But one thing I would say, guys, don't watch Channel 4 either, unless the idea of a lineup including Rory Stewart, Emily Maitlis, and Alistair Campbell. How does that sound? Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
So not for me. But I'd actually, guys, I may be involved in some an alternative broadcast that night, not a TV thing, an online thing, which you'll hear more about shortly. So maybe.
I see. Yes, as the results come in, we can see your reaction.
Yeah, indeed. For what fun that would be.
I'd rather watch that, David. I'd much rather not watch that.
Yes.
Well, just a little bit more on this, actually, because Nicola Sturgeon and some of her SNP cronies are being accused of rank hypocrisy on this.
No.
No. Again.
No, it's not possible, is it?
Another week, another rank hypocrisy. Because it was 5 years ago that the SNP, demanded that Ruth Davidson quit as an MSP for doing exactly the same job. The SNP attacked Baroness Davidson, who, like Sturgeon, was then a former Scottish Party leader and backbench MSP, and she accepted £7,500 from ITV for her appearance on the night of the 2019 election. And several senior SNP figures claimed serving politicians should not seek to enrich themselves for representing their parties on election nights.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody is actually denying that Sturgeon is going to get paid for this, so she's going to get paid for it. So Kate Forbes, now the SNP Deputy First Minister, who led the criticism for accepting the payment, and Angus Robertson, who's now SNP Culture Secretary, said the payment to Davidson was another reminder of why she should immediately quit as an MSP. Yes, it showed her neglecting constituents. So talking of neglecting constituents, we have got Nicola Sturgeon, who has only spoken 3 times in Holyrood since quitting as First Minister in March last year. Her most recent contribution was 5 months ago.
Right.
Now, she's getting paid every day, but she hasn't said anything for 5 months.
Not a minister, though, is she? Just a normal...
She's not a minister. She's only spoken 3 times in the last year. And she's failed to join any committees. But she's spending 10 to 15 hours a week working on her book, for which she's getting paid £300,000 advance. That's not the total payment. That's just the advance.
That's assuming that sells more of the copies to that value. If not, she'll have to give that back. But anyway.
I don't know if she does, but anyway. So we haven't
No,
heard
I don't-
any outcry from the SNP about Nicola getting paid by ITV on election night, or how she is neglecting her constituents. So their hypocrisy and reverence of Nicola knows no bounds.
Well said. Very good point indeed.
Very good there. It's a shame it's not Zimmer. You would have won that one there.
Yeah, true.
Right.
I'll win anyway.
Probably.
Yes, well, we have a little bit of an extended.
I'm psyching you guys out.
extended Zimmer.
I'm already under pressure.
You're losers already.
Right, okay. That was a great segment there, Mary. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know if I can face it. It's like...
I'm going to have anxiety from now till then, thinking about it.
Just can't face it.
Maybe we could hide behind something and watch.
You could make a cutout of that face, that illustration. Of Nicola, and then stick it on the telly, just in the position where she appears, something like that. Anyways, okay, we're rattling through this tonight. Things you can do to support the show. You can make a donation to the majority's SNP out fundraiser. Please help us get these billboards up.
Yeah. The more billboards, the better, people. Come on.
Yes, come on. We need the billboards up. Mary's ready to go and give them a call. So please do put your cash in right now. But
I would like to say a big thank you to Rita. Thank you so much, Rita. You're such a great supporter.
Right, thank you. That is true. Very good. You can buy a T-shirt or a mug. We talked about the T-shirts already. You can buy them. They're great. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can tell your friends about us, or you can do all of the above, which makes us feel really loved. Underlined and exclamation pointed. Coming up, it's the moment you have all been waiting for. It's the highlight of the week. It is Zimmer of the Week.
Yay.
All right, so before we go on to this week's nominations, a wee bit of an update from last week.
Oh.
Yes, if you remember last week, I nominated the Herald journalist Neil I'm Not a Nationalist Mackay.
Yeah, has he resigned?
Of the week for thinking he was too good to be associated with oafish nationalism. Because he thinks if you don't wave a flag, you're not a nationalist. But if you do write constant articles supporting nationalism, you're also not a nationalist. If you wave a flag, you are a nationalist. But if you write constant articles supporting nationalism, you're not a nationalist.
Right.
Anyway, this week Neil got all upset because a well-known nationalist account called Grouse Beater told him to go back to Ulster. Mackay being an Irishman, apparently. It just didn't go down too well. And Neil, if you remember, is not a nationalist, said Grouse Beater was a disgrace to the Yes movement, and then said that if the SNP don't speak up about this, if they don't speak up about this, then he will 100% leave not vote for them again, which is a kind of bargaining. It's a little bit weird. Because basically it's like, shouldn't you already, if you're getting abused by people on your own side, maybe you might not want to vote for them anyway, not actually make a bargain somehow to say, if you don't abuse me, then I'll still vote for you. Seems a bit weird anyway. And not to mention that people like us get told to leave Scotland almost every week.
Absolutely right.
As well. And, actually, I don't think we should respond in kind to this. I think the way you respond to that is to say, no, actually, I want everyone to live in Scotland and not be under the threat of idiots saying you have to leave Scotland. You have a system that means that we don't have to say that. That nobody should even think of saying that. What a ridiculous thing to be doing. Anyway, welcome to the dark side, Neil, because it doesn't matter. If you think that your nationalism is respectable, it's still an oafish ideology based on division, greed, grievance, and national superiority.
Yeah.
David, do you have any thoughts on Mackay?
Neil Mackay has always been a Scottish nationalist. I use that term very loosely, Scottish. He's the ex-editor of the Sunday Herald, and at the time that he was editor of the Sunday Herald, he used to make a pitch for independence, Scottish independence, in every article. He made great play of his Northern Irish Republican nationalist roots. He is every inch the modern day Irish Scottish nationalist. That's what he is. His denials of being a nationalist are as weak as London Lager. It's a complete lie. And he writes poor articles. He's trying now to roll back a little bit. So, of course, I'm not really a nationalist. Nobody believes you. You are absolutely talking rubbish. As an impartial observer of the scene, he is a joke, seriously. And he's let the cat out of the bag with that nonsense, saying You do what I tell you, I'll never vote for you again. But I'm not a nationalist. Yeah, right. Okay, great.
It's like, nationalism is not, I'm not an oafish nationalist, but look at all these oafish nationalists I've supported and promoted.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, and if you don't stop them, then I'll never promote and support you ever again. I don't support you.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Wake up, but smell it. I mean, it's just so up themselves. It's ridiculous.
This is
Anyway.
what articles used to be like, fueled with anger rather than any kind of logic. This is exactly in keeping with the stuff he used to produce for the Sunday Herald. Genuinely,
But he's not even your Zimmer, is he,
No,
Mark?
no, that was just an update. This Zimmer's going to go on for a while. So anyway, right, okay, it's all about, mine is I'm going to nominate the senior Tories that think a separate Scottish Conservative Party can beat nationalism. Okay, so an article in the Times today, this one here, actually you can tell by the title how screwed up this is. The future for Scotland's Tories is independence or irrelevance. Absolute nonsense. Here we go. That was, of course, Kenny Farquharson, the paper's appeaser-in-chief, and he was trying to demoralise Conservative support and boost nationalism by this proposal that now that it's a time for a leadership change, why don't we just change and make Scottish Conservative Party completely separate from the UK party, because to counter English nationalism. So this is something that's been coming out from the two articles in the Times this week, where they're basically trying to, Scottish Tories, the senior Scottish Tories, are trying to say that Nigel Farage and Reform, and whether you support them or not, doesn't matter, but they're trying to say that they are English nationalists. And that's why they don't want to go support a Tory party that goes further to the right to support this English nationalism. I think this is deeply irresponsible talk. If there's no evidence that Nigel Farage or any of the people who want a more effective Tory party are English nationalists at all. It's absolutely terrible.
Well, people are bandying about the nationalist slur.
Yeah, well, it's bad.
Where it's, where it doesn't fit.
Yeah, well, it's bad enough when you get SNP people saying, well, you're a British nationalist. But now what they're trying to say is that if you support, if you want to close your borders, or let's say regulate the borders even, control the borders we talked about, can stop illegal immigration, that you're an English nationalist. And you're part of the far right. It's the same kind of thing. These are Scottish Tories saying this.
Yes.
Not SNP people. Anyway, and also complaining that anyone who supports it is a unionist ultra. I mean, which you like.
Unionist, yeah.
Anyway, okay, right. So that's that part. But so this is all coming from these senior Tories, right? And they're the same senior Tories who gave us Ruth Davidson and Douglas Ross, who did very little, who basically weren't, who I think people who are Tories would say are barely Tories, close to Lib Dems. Yeah. So the people who installed these barely there Tories are slurring the people who are actual Tories and who, as nationalists, it boggles the mind. Yeah. Anyway, a separated Scottish Conservative Party, to my mind, is a nationalist dream, because basically all the SNP needs to say is, well, the Tories didn't like Westminster, Scottish Tories didn't like Westminster so much, they wanted to separate as well. And it would make every single election into a referendum. What we talked about earlier, actually, because it would just be these Scottish Tories against SNP, and the fight would always be just exactly what Douglas Ross was doing, saying, "Oh, vote for us to stop independence," instead of a wider UK position, which is what we actually want from both Labour and from the Tories as well. The problem, another thing I wanted just to point out was, you see all the people here who are talking, they say they're going to vote for the party, not for Douglas Ross. And the thing I've realised actually over the past few days is that a lot of Tories in Scotland are actually tactically voting for the Scottish Conservative Party, right? When they would rather stay at home or vote for Reform. And people like Douglas Ross are going to be the beneficiaries of this conservative tactical voting. And that means the problem with that is that when Douglas Ross wins, right, let's just say he wins, that the Scottish Conservative Party are going to take that as an affirmation that their weakness and a type of politician like Douglas Ross would win. And that's not the case at all. They're just extremely lucky that Conservative voters are motivated enough to get rid of the SNP that they'll either vote for Labour, tactically vote for Labour, or they'll tactically vote to keep Douglas Ross in place, even though they don't like him.
Yeah, just
So
they're tactically voting for a Conservative.
yeah, tactically voting for a Conservative, right? So I mean, this is a thing. This is, I think, this is a thing. Anyway, you can be guaranteed, I believe, anyway, that if the Scottish Conservative Party does create a separate party, they will lose all their support. It'll be a wet party full of. I mean, why would any Conservative vote for barely their Tories who embrace nationalist goals? Especially when the SNP is diminished and Conservative voters have other alternatives. I think it's utter madness, and for that reason, these senior Conservative leaders who are touting this idea are my Zimmers of the week. So it was a bit long, but anyway, I had to get it off my chest.
Very good. I mean, you remember Murdo Fraser tried this idea when he was running
That's
for
right.
party leader against Ruth Davidson, and he was in the lead until he said, of course, the real answer is for us to break away because the Tory brand is so toxic, and that was the end of his campaign.
Well, see, this is the problem I was trying to say. They just don't want to be Tories. They want to be nice people.
Yeah.
Or they want to be, in this article, it actually says here, this Farquharson one here, he basically says that, they want a decent, civilized, equitable society.
Yeah.
But we're not living in that,
No.
and that's not what politics is about. We're not in this to make friends. We're in this to win and do what we and to stop things or
Yeah.
to do things. That's what it's about, and you can't do that if you try to be friends. If Tories try and say, "Oh, we're not actually Tories," you just lose the core. You lose the base.
Well, that's what's
Base-
going on with Sunak and all these guys, exactly that. And now they're getting torn apart as a party, and Reform is in danger of overtaking them on a very much right of centre platform, far more so than the social liberalism that the modern day Conservatives pursue, which is almost indivisible from Liberal Democrats or even Labour. So, I mean,
that's the thing. So what we're seeing is the senior Tories who put in Douglas Ross and Ruth Davidson are calling people who just want to control the borders and get to what might say traditional Tory values. They're calling them English nationalists and far right.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact that a person like Kenny Farquharson, who is an appeaser, and we know that in many, many articles, and so it's all behind this, tells you all you need to know about it. This is not the way forward for a effective Tory party in Scotland. They need to stand up and say, no, that's it. This is the way it goes. And if you don't like it, that's fine. We'll go with the core and build our core voters back up. And then we'll know you stand for something instead of always chasing after people who don't want to be Tories anyway, who never vote for you. It's nonsense.
Indeed.
Right. Anyway. David's
I didn't
coming
mean to
up.
actually put that up.
Right, okay. Right, okay, we'll do this clip. Okay.
My nomination for Zimmer of this week is SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn. Flynn, of course, is not only the party's Westminster leader, he is very clearly and increasingly clearly being groomed to replace the floundering John Swinney as party leader. The dead giveaway team last night on Twitter, you'll all have seen Leslie Ridiculous with her gushing praise for Flynn ever since he was involved in that debate with Farage and the others last week. Where he said everything in Scotland's wonderful and free, and because we hate Brexit and we love immigrants. That's pretty much all he said. Now, of course, the London audience lapped that up. Anyway, so on after that debate last week, Riddick was saying how wonderful Flynn is. Last night, after Swinney, the party leader, appeared on the Scottish Leaders Debate Night Special, Riddick said absolutely nothing about John Swinney's performance, but she did say again, on the podcast this week, has Nigel Farage got over the drubbing he was given by Stephen Flynn? Ah, yeah, interesting. So read the room here, John Powell. As Howard Hunt said to John Dean in the film JFK, your grave's already been dug, John, and that's he's already getting flown out. He's already getting edged out and replaced by Flynn. Anyway, last night, or I think it was yesterday, Peter Adam Smith, the excellent STV or ITV now interviewer, had a chat with Flynn, and he put him right on the spot. Do you have the video there, Mark Ventures?
Well, I'm going to try this. This is not normally the way we do it, but let's see if this will work.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, let's try this and see if I can get this to play.
Doesn't matter if you can. It's okay.
Right, give it a go. Can you tell me if you can hear him?
Quiet.
He's quiet.
Quiet.
Yeah, that's about as loud as I can
There's no
get it.
brothers. There's probably too quiet. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what he said. All it was, they were talking about. Smith is brilliant at putting, particularly SNP guys, on the spot.
Right, hold on. I'll just get him off there. Right, okay. There
Anyway,
you go.
so, and he was saying, right, okay. So Smith was saying, how are you going to get independence if you win the election? Yes, I think we can in 5 years. We'll get rid of him. How are you going to get it? Well, we'll go to Keir Starmer. And are you suggesting? Well, anyway, the question that Flynn asked Smith was, this is articulate, fluent Flynn. Let's not forget. He said, "Are you suggesting a Labour Prime Minister is going to follow the same tact as these three individuals: Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak? Tact." Tact is saying the right thing. You don't follow a tact. You follow a tack, or you follow a tactic, or maybe Stephen follows a tic-tac. I don't know. Anyway, whatever he meant, he said it wrong yet again. Because he's fluent and articulate. The man can hardly utter 2 words without making a mistake. And of course,
yes, didn't he have some though? I mean, didn't he have a speech impairment or something? So
exactly. So yeah, indeed. So
I mean,
sorry about that. But this is just using a misnomer, a malapropism. Yes. Sorry, mate. Fluent and articulate, don't make me laugh. Zoomer. That's exactly.
Well, I think the main zoomer is not so much that, David, is the fact that he promises independence in 5 years.
Exactly. That's
the zoomer part.
Because Starmer is going to say, well, Stephen, since you've asked so nicely, okay then, yeah, right, okay. What a lot of rubbish. I mean, he can't even get his words right saying that. Just utter drivel. So he looked. Play the clip at home if you can, because he just looked ridiculous. And the look in his face of shock when he's asked these questions, which his Spads hadn't prepared the answers. Oh, it's priceless. It's
but I mean, you just imagine you're a SNP follower, right? And he comes out of that. He says, "I'm going to get it in 5 years." You're like, for what, 5 years? I mean, we might say how, but even they would go, "But we're going to have to wait 5 years."
Yeah, quite. And that's where people will jump ship to Alba. Because we won yesterday, not 5 years' time. You know, that's the whole thing. That's why they're going to be strong in a couple of years, Alba, probably.
You think so?
Well, I think they will, because people, don't forget, these people are going to, SNP voters are going to see their party, the flagship party, decimated this year. They're going to lose probably 30 seats. And what they're going to do as a result of that, they're not going to say, well, let's regroup and try again 1 more, even 2 years, and we'll get there. They won't. So particularly if they've got Alba, if more defections take place, they will lose some votes to Alba, certainly. Yeah, I think Alba.
Yeah, I don't think Alba's going to be real.
No, I don't think that. I think what they will do. Certainly, you won't get SNP voters voting Green tactically in the list as they did last time. So those votes will probably go to Alba this time, unless they think they now see the SNP as a list-only party, realising they're not going to win so many constituencies.
Right. Well, talking of Alba, let's go on to Mary Zimmer.
Oh.
Yes, I know you're here
I'm up
as well. Okay, all right. Okay, here we go.
My Zoomer of the week is he who will not let people speak, Alex Salmond, for his hypocrisy this week, commenting on Douglas Ross resigning.
Yep.
Alex said, "This is the first case of a rat deserting a sinking ship while simultaneously trying to clamber aboard a gravy train." It's like, it's not even very well put. It's clunky, isn't it? While simultaneously trying to clamber aboard a gravy train. Now, who the hell wrote that? Couldn't he have just said, "and clambering aboard a gravy"? I can't even say it either. But as I said, he's not my Zimmer for his inelegant grammar. He's my Zimmer for his hypocrisy. Now, I'm no big fan of Douglas Ross, but I can name another big rat, a former party leader, an MSP who resigned from Holyrood back in 2001 and kept his MP-ship, and that is Alex Salmond.
Surprise, surprise.
Himself, yeah. Twister. Alex was an MP off and on from 1987 until 2017, and an on-off MSP from 1999 to 2016. So lots of jumping ship and staying on the gravy train at the same time. So if anyone knows about rats...
It's a gravy ship.
Trains and ships. And
yes, it's a gravy ship full of rats.
So if anyone knows about rats sinking ships and gravy trains, it's Alex Salmond. A bit of self-awareness, please, Alex.
Oh, come on. I mean, that's
how can he come out and say that when he knows that he's been an MSP and an MP for like 20 odd years?
Yeah.
Well, the hypocrisy. I mean, hypocrisy is good for them.
No
if you try and do any hypocrisy, they on you like a ton of bricks. But they're all right. They can do it as much as they like. It's a form of power, hypocrisy. But anyway, David is going to decide. So we've got.
Right, given the feedback tonight, I certainly can't give it to the senior Tories because we'll look like we're anti-Tory. We're not at all, guys. We just want to do what's best to stop the SNP. That's it. Anyway, I never give it to myself, so there really is only one possible outcome. The thing is, had anybody suggested Kate Forbes or Angus Robertson for their equal hypocrisy in castigating who did they ever go at for doing something that they've already done themselves? Oh, yeah, the Ruth Davidson thing, where they insisted she should stand down and all the rest of it. Sturgeon, that's it. They would have got it for that, certainly. But no, in this instance, because of Salmon's blatant hypocrisy, it goes to Salmon, so well done, Mary.
Thank you very much. Thank
There
you.
we go.
Yay! We
There,
did type it in then. Hold on.
Right,
Where am
very
I?
good. I just realised I hadn't been in the chats when you were on. But yours was short. So anyway.
Oh, you haven't done. Oh, so you're trying to make me lose by not doing the captions, aren't you?
Oh, goodness me.
Oh, there's
There'll
some
be trouble later.
Oh,
Forbes, Robertson and Sturgeon. Good shout.
underhand tactics going on here.
Indeed. All right. Okay, while you're doing that, we are so happy to have you with us here on Scotland's #1 Politics Chat. We'll be back next Wednesday at 7 p.m. And the thought for the week is some good news.
We could do some good news, Mark.
Here's some good news. Look at this here. Tunnock's vows we won't shrink our tea cakes or anything else.
Brilliant.
Yep, the caramel, Scotland's national foods, the caramel wafer and the tea cake. And you can maybe put some haggis in there as well, maybe not at the same time. And the Maker have announced that they're not going to shrink their foods. What about that? What a great Scottish success story. Who would dare to go and make a protest outside there?
Yeah,
Remember the Scottish Resistance did that outside the Tunnock's factory, and the old ladies are like, get the hell out of here, type of thing. Anyway,
well, I'm just glad there's something in these days something we can rely on.
Yes, no shrinkflation. Now, if only some other things could stay the way they were presented originally, then perhaps our political life would be somewhat different. Anyway, we will see you again next week. Thank you very much for being with us, and enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy election coverage.
Thanks for all the comments, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, guys. Speak next week. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right, take care.